we have the toolbox. We teach them how to use the tools so that they will then be able to use those tools when they have something that is of significance to them when they are older.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers. So, Andrew, it was almost a year ago that my team got together and said, what are some things we can talk about in 2025? And you had suggested this idea of how to think, because that's part of what we claim that we do is teach students how to think. And of course, we've heard over and over again from teachers and students the value of IEW writing and how it actually does help them think. So our topic today in November is how to think and challenging assumptions. So if you're challenging an assumption, you need to think about what it is you're challenging in order to come up with an argument for or against the assumption that's being made. So it's a huge topic. And I know when you walked in here, you said, I don't know how we're going to unpack this, but I did, in preparation for this podcast, look at what we talked about last month. And last month was about critical thinking. And we had our dear friend Jennifer Mauser on, and she spoke to that. And she wrote a blog post that we'll link to in our show notes. And I think the big topic of this year, unbeknownst to us when we were creating this idea of how to think, is AI, right, and how to combat that. And I think that's one of the assumptions that we as a company are challenging, that AI will make our lives better. We could talk about that. I also was thinking about just our writing method and how we teach writing, that step-by-step approach that is not the norm. It's not where other English composition programs start with content. They start with a blank page, and students are expected to know how to write based on, I'm not sure what. That's another assumption that I think IEW challenges, is that students need more intentional instruction. So, wow, that's a whole lot of things that we can talk about today. Andrew, where do you want to start?
Well, I don't even know that most people accept the premise that AI is going to make our lives better. I suppose we could go take a poll. Hasn't made my life any better, but then again, I don't live in a tech world. I don't have a need for AI to save me time and all those things that people claim that it will do. Mm-hmm. And I'm old. And oddly, I actually prefer doing some things myself. Mm-hmm. I was listening to a very interesting little video clip of a man who does work in the tech world and has a kind of a channel of AI guidance for parents. And he said, ask one of these, ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, ask them for 10 facts about some historical person. Just pick one. And then go fact check those facts. He said, you are most likely to find one or more of those facts to be incorrect.
Interesting.
And that is my experience. Almost every time I have tried to do research using AI, it's pretty much only about something I have a good sense of. And then I'll sniff something out and think, it just doesn't seem right to me. And then I'll go check it, and indeed, it was not right. And then you go back to the AI and say, what's your source on this, or is this really right? And go, oh, no, sorry, I was wrong. To me, it's decreased my quality of life, just in terms of this idea that now something is going to give me information as though it is 100% reliable and correct, only it's not. And this is irritating me a great deal.
Yes.
Now, in terms of can you use this to automate certain things, to streamline, to do work for you? I guess I don't need that myself. So I'm not terribly interested. So I don't know. You said there's an assumption that AI is going to make our life better.
It seems to be the narrative that we hear over and over again, like we need to learn how to do this, take this course. It will, grow your business. It will help you write papers. It will.
I have no proof of that so far other than people making that claim. So I suppose that's what we are looking at today is, where is, and this is funny because you and I have talked about the oddity of this idiom that has now crept into business. What's your source of truth?
Yes.
And that's something now everybody's concerned about. And at least if you go to, say, Wikipedia, you do have a format there that is people challenging each other and forcing them to cite the sources of information that they put down. The AI doesn't do that unless you go into it a lot more and say, what's your source of this statement? And I just find it frustrating and obnoxious.
Yes.
And, even in my own writing class, one kid said, well, can we use AI? I said, absolutely not. We're using RI here. This is what we are doing.
Our own intelligence.
Real intelligence, not artificial.
Oh, I see. RI. Not our I. RI. Real intelligence.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was also thinking as I was preparing for having this conversation with you, how do we challenge assumptions? I'm thinking of the writing assignments that we give to students. And I thought about our persuasive essay model and how brilliant that is. So we give the students an idea to consider, and they have to choose a side. And then once they choose a side, they have to present strategically how to either persuade us that their idea is right, which is converting us to their idea, or agreeing with them and maybe even more so that we're now going to go out and take action on this.
Well, generally, and this is not new. I mean,
no.
Honestly, we aren't doing anything that hasn't been done for a couple thousand years at least. But that idea of acknowledging the opposing view, that's something that many people don't think to do in daily life.
Like, especially not today.
Here's my opinion, and I'm obviously right because I only hang out with people who agree with me about everything. Right. Well, what is the opposing view, and how do we address that? Acknowledge perhaps some statements or aspects of that view that may be true. And then how does that support or detract from the position we're trying to argue?
Right.
It's all about conversation. And, there are so many people now who are pointing out that what we really need as a society is we need more discourse.
Right.
We need dialogue. We need to listen to and respond to each other in a not emotionally overcharged way. And part of it is not being so prideful that we get attached to our own opinion. And humility is not something that is widely appreciated in today's culture. Like the highest paid people are probably among the least humble in many ways. They are the pro this, the pop star, the great actor, the brilliant writer. And you get to a point where you're so well known that saying you are wrong about something could be devastating to your career. I was just listening to a discussion on this, how Malcolm Gladwell who's probably one of the best known nonfiction writers alive on earth today.
I've read several of his books, yes.
Said that he was bullied into having a particular opinion about something.
Interesting.
Well, okay, you can appreciate the fact that he acknowledged that he held a opinion that he later considered wrong, but why did he allow himself to be bullied into expressing an opinion he didn't really have? Well, that's in that problem of just being too big, I guess. So most of our students don't have that problem yet, but we live in this world where you make it by just being bold and brash and saying whatever you think regardless of whose assumptions those may be based on.
Yeah.
This is a complicated world.
Yes.
Complicated area. But I do think we can agree that when we teach children to write, if we do it in the correct way, they have to have a modicum of humility to address the opposing view. They may not agree with it, but at least they have to acknowledge it.
Yes. And, for our listeners that may be newer to our approach, can you spend a few minutes describing the persuasive essay model?
Well, there's kind of two that are often confused but closely connected. One would be an argumentative essay. Mm-hmm. One would be a persuasive essay. They're essentially the same thing. You have an issue, something where there could be a difference of opinion, and you collect up the reasons, the logic, the sources, the facts, the examples, whatever, to support that, and then you collect up some of the opposing reasons or examples, and then you sort through. The argumentative model basically says, here's how I'm going to argue, here's the statement I'm going to support, here are opposing views which I'm going to negate, and you argue. The persuasive model tweak a little bit. Rather than giving away the position you're going to argue in the beginning, you ask the question, and then you more strategically lead the reader to the conclusion by acknowledging the opposing view, finding weaknesses in that, and then bringing in your supporting evidence and doing that in such a way as to keep the reader reading. Because if you write an essay and you tell people what you're going to argue, if they already have an opinion, they already have their assumption, they're just going to say, I don't agree with that, and throw it away before they even read it. If you ask the question, then people are curious. Oh, is this going to agree with what I generally think about something or not? And because we're curious, we will read on. And then you've got a chance, perhaps, to persuade someone.
Yep. So we teach that in some of our Structure and Style for Students materials. I'm thinking one of my favorite ones that you did, Andrew, was the penny. And should we eliminate the penny?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, one of the arguments for eliminating the penny was, and it's still true, it costs more to make a penny than a penny. And so we would save a lot of money if we just stopped making pennies. But of course, pennies are sentimental. We have penny collections. How would prices go up or down based on losing a penny? Anyway, it was a kind of somewhat innocuous because no one really gets hurt if we eliminate or keep the penny, which was something that we were constantly looking for topics related to that. But that's an assumption that we were challenging and having the students form an opinion about that.
Yep, that was a good one. Every time we did one of these, I learned all sorts of things that I did not know, that I probably would never have known unless we had engaged in the writing project. And I think that happens to a lot of students, is that they think they want to argue or they think they want to persuade, and then they end up learning all sorts of things about it that they didn't expect to learn. And so that's kind of a side product of having the broader view. The thing I learned was the analysis of how much money would not go to charities if you eliminated the pennies, because people throw their change in the jar or whatever, and that turns out to be a decent number.
Yes.
Now, is it a completely valid argument for keeping the penny? Well, who knows? Probably not, but it is a factor, a new bit of information that was worth considering in the debate.
Yeah. I remember, Andrew, and because, we've known each other for almost 20 years, because even before I started working for you, you and I did some projects together when I was working at Biola.
You realize pretty soon it's going to be almost 30 years.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, actually, when I think about that. But I do know that I was thinking about what you were sharing about Malcolm Gladwell, and how he was bullied into believing something.
Or not necessarily believing, but saying.
Oh, saying something, yeah. Well, and I remember something that you said that I know you no longer believe. And I think a lot of people in our world of education, when you shifted a little bit, kind of breathed a collective sigh of relief. And that is your commitment to cursive writing. And at the beginning, when I first knew you, it was like, yeah, I need to learn cursive so that I can A, read my wife's handwriting, and B, be able to sign a check. But now you've spent a lot of time researching the value of learning cursive.
Well, it's still not a hill I'm going to die on.
No.
and if someone is just not seeing the value, I'm not going to work super hard to persuade them that they should do it. But mostly that's because of so much more recent scientific research about the benefits to the brain, the connection with creativity, confidence levels. I think the arguments for cursive writing are very good. They're more well articulated than I ever experienced 30 years ago.
Sure. Yeah. So this idea of challenging assumptions, we have to be able to know how to think critically, have humility, and then be able to write persuasively. That's a pretty large bill.
That's a lifetime project.
Yes.
It's not something you learn in middle school. I think people somehow have this probably erroneous semi-conscious mental construct that, in 9th grade, you're going to learn to do this. But we're still learning. And every time I have to write something, I have to revisit my assumptions about the thing I'm writing. And very often that happens as the result of a question or a conversation that I have with someone.
Right.
And that's why this idea of discourse, of conference, of conversation, I think is so important to me professionally. And I think it's really important that we help our young people experience the value of this. And there are people out there doing it. We have the Socratic seminar idea that's growing, say, in the classical ed world. We have teachers all over who are working on ways to get their kids to engage with ideas rather than default to pedantic positions pushed. Oh, look at that nice alliteration. Pedantic positions pushed by influencers. But sometimes it feels a little bit like we're outnumbered in a child's life.
Yes. And just even as you were sharing the value of learning this, and it's more than just a one-year process. It's why we really encourage our teachers and teaching parents to not just do 1 year of IEW, but to spend a few years going through the units and wrestling with these stylistic techniques. And yes, we provide content so that they can learn to write without having to come up with the topics. We give them the information. But even in some ways, what we give them, we try to be as neutral as we can, if I can say it that way, not for the sake of trying to persuade them our position on anything, but to teach them the method so that they can engage in sources outside of what we provide for them.
Yeah, sure. We have the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
We teach them how to use the tools. We give them, little pieces of stuff to work on. But the goal really is using the tools so that they will then be able to use those tools when they have something that is meaningful, important, relevant, of significance to them when they are older and able to deal with more complex conflicts of information and opinion.
Yes. Well, it's a good work that we are doing here, Andrew, that I'm happy to be a part of. So thank you.
I assume that you're happy to be a part of, and now I know.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcasts. Here you can also find show notes and relevant links from today's broadcast. One last thing, would you mind going to iTunes to rate and review our podcast? This really helps other smart, caring listeners like you find us. Thanks so much.